Insecure leaders secretly want to be indispensable. Great leaders are trying to make themselves unnecessary, not irrelevant, but unnecessary, because they have created capability everywhere. Think about the best leader you have ever had. You probably don't remember every target they gave you or every meeting you had with them, but maybe you remember the moment they trusted you with something you weren't sure you were ready for. They saw something in you before you could see it in yourself. And because they believed you could, eventually you did. That's multiplying. A leader was created that moment. And maybe that's the ultimate measure of leadership. How many people follow me is not important. But what is important is how many people became leaders because I led them. That's multiplying. Hey everyone, welcome to Pathfinders. Today I want to talk to you about something special. 8 leadership qualities that is needed in a leader in 2026. What are some of the qualities that made someone a great leader 20 years ago? Aren't the qualities people are actually looking for today? Because something fundamental has changed. Information used to be power. Today, everyone has information. Knowledge used to separate the leader from the team. Today, AI can put extraordinary knowledge into the hands of almost anyone. And authority, a title, can still make someone report to you, but it can't make them believe in you. So I went back to some of the most enduring thinking on leadership and started asking a different question. If we were defining great leadership today, not 20 years ago, not even 5 years ago, what would we look for? It came down to these 8 qualities. Well, there's one in particular, number 7. It's probably my favorite because the more leaders I meet, the more convinced I am that we have misunderstood this quality. We often confuse it with charisma, with confidence, with executive presence. It's none of those things, actually. And when you meet someone who genuinely has it, you feel it before they even utter a single word. We'll get there. But first, there's another important trait that modern leadership simply cannot survive without. Hi, I'm Vijay. I solve real problems with technology. Let's get started with today's episode. The first leadership quality or trait I want to talk today about is being clear. Clarity. Here's a leadership experiment you can try tomorrow. Walk into your organization, your neighborhood, your community, and separately ask 5 people, what are the 3 things that matter the most right now? Don't give them time to prepare. Just ask. If you get 5 different answers, you may have discovered one of your biggest leadership problems. We used to call this vision, and vision matters, but vision can live 5 years away. People also need to know what matters tomorrow morning. That's why the word I prefer today is clear. Simon Sinek helped popularize the importance of starting with why. But modern leadership has another challenge. We aren't suffering from a lack of information. We are drowning in it. Emails, dashboards, Slack, Teams, your calendar, meetings, notifications, AI now, and the endless array of things that continuously gives you more data, more priorities, more possibilities, and an endless list of things. And in that environment, one of the greatest gifts a leader can give people is clarity. Great leaders don't simply add information, they subtract confusion. They say, this matters and this doesn't. We are going here. Here's why. Right? And for now, ignore the rest. That's clarity for us. That's clarity for a team. Because here's something I've noticed. Confusion at the bottom is often complexity tolerated at the top. And when everything becomes important, nothing is. So don't ask, did I explain this strategy? Ask, could they explain it without me? That's clarity. But clarity alone has a problem. You can be incredibly clear and still be someone nobody wants to follow, which brings us to number 2. Be human, right? I think that is more important. Everyone who works for us has 2 lives, the one you see and the one you don't. You see the employee, the manager, right? The salesperson, the engineer, the performance review, the KPI. But behind every one of those things, there is a person. There's a real person behind it. Someone worried about a parent, someone raising a child, someone questioning whether they are good enough, someone dealing with something they'll never mention in your Monday morning's meeting. We traditionally call this empathy. I think leadership today asks for something even deeper and broader. Be human. Amy Edmondson's research on psychological safety showed the importance of environments where people can take interpersonal risks, where they can admit mistakes, ask questions, and speak honestly. Because consider this, if your people are afraid to tell the truth, you're not leading reality. You're leading the version of reality they believe you can have. And being human isn't lowering standards. Sometimes the most human thing you can do is tell somebody a truth they don't want to hear. Respectfully, privately, clearly. Because empathy without honesty isn't always kindness. Sometimes it's avoidance. So here's a better measure of leadership. Not how do people behave when I enter the room, but what are people willing to say when I am in the room? And sometimes what they tell you will require you to make a decision you don't want to make. That takes us to number 3. Be decisive. Decision making is super important for a leader. There's a sentence that sounds intelligent in almost every boardroom. We need more data. Sometimes we do. And sometimes we are scared to decide. Decisiveness in 2026 isn't pretending you know the future. Nobody does. It's knowing when you have enough information to take the next intelligent step. Modern leader has to become comfortable saying, based on what we know today, this is our decision. Not, I guarantee I'm right, but we are moving. And here's what surprised me the most. The enemy of decisiveness isn't always indecision. Sometimes it's perfectionism. One more report, one more meeting, one more consultant hire, one more scenario, right? So eventually the search for certainty becomes a hiding place. So ask for yourself, am I gathering information to improve the decision I'm making or to avoid owning one? And that question leads directly to our quality 4, because the decisive leaders need something that stops confidence becoming arrogance. Be curious. Curiosity is super important. That's a dangerous moment in every successful leader's career. People stop challenging you at one point. What's even more dangerous? You start enjoying it. Early in your careers, we ask questions. Then we become experienced. People start asking us the question. And slowly, knowledge becomes expertise. Expertise becomes certainty. Certainty becomes identity. And suddenly changing your mind feels like losing. That's why curiosity matters. The most powerful person in a meeting doesn't have to demonstrate, look how much I know. You can rather ask, what am I missing? I go back to Michael Bungay-Steiner's coaching work, where he captures this beautifully through the power of asking another question before rushing to provide an answer. And AM makes curiosity even more valuable because we are entering a world where answers are becoming incredibly cheap. The quality of your questions becomes incredibly expensive. The leader of the future may not be the person with the best answers. It may be the person who consistently asks a question nobody else thought to ask. But curiosity creates another challenge. Sometimes the answer you discover is in good news, and that's when everyone starts watching you. The next leadership trait we want to get into is be steady. Anyone can look like a leader when the numbers are up, and I want to know who you become when they're down. The customer leaves, the best person resigns, the launch fails, the board is probably unhappy, something you believed would work doesn't. Now leadership becomes visible. People look at leaders for emotional cues. They're silently asking, should I be worried? Steady leadership doesn't mean pretending the storm isn't real. It means showing people a storm doesn't require panic. Your worst days as a leader may become the days people remember you the most, not because you solved everything, but because of who you become while you were solving it. People might forget your strategy deck, but they'll remember who were you when things went wrong. And what happens next separates leadership from management, because someone who has to own it, which brings us to the next leadership quality, that is about ownership. Imagine something significant goes wrong, and before anyone can begin pointing fingers, the leader says, that's mine. Watch what happens to the room. We used to use the word accountability a lot, but accountability can sound like something we impose on somebody else. I'm holding you accountable. Ownership starts somewhere more uncomfortable. It's with me. Jim Collins observed that exceptional level 5 leaders tended to direct credit outward when things went well and look towards themselves when things went badly. Ownership doesn't mean everything is my fault. It means whatever my part is, I will own all of it. We sometimes hide mistakes because we think admitting them makes us look weak, but people already know you make mistakes. What they're actually trying to discover is, can you admit them? The blame mindset would ask, who caused this? Ownership mindset would ask, what do we do next? And now we get to number 7, the one I mentioned at the beginning, and perhaps my favorite, because you can have clarity, humanity, decisiveness, curiosity, steadiness, but like ownership mindset, and still struggle to become the kind of leader people deeply, deeply trust. Because something has to sit underneath all these 6. Humility. Humility. Have you ever met someone who doesn't seem to need the room's approval? Not arrogant, not distant, just being humble, right? Just being comfortable in their own skin. They don't become louder around powerful people. They don't become dismissive around people with less power. They don't need to tell you how important they are. You somehow know. You figure it out. That's being humble. That's being grounded. That's being authentic. We have used words like integrity, authenticity, being grounded, and executive presence, and a lot of these different terminologies, but each captures part of it. But humility means something slightly different to me. I know who I am when the room changes. My values don't change with the audience. My treatment of people doesn't change with their title. My confidence doesn't require somebody else's insecurity. And my principles don't disappear when following them becomes inconvenient. Jim Collins found something fascinating in leaders who built enduring organizations. They weren't necessarily the charismatic personalities we often associate with leadership. His level 5 leaders combine tremendous professional ethics with personal humility. And I think there's a lesson here. Who is a level 5 leader, you ask? Level 5 leader is someone who has the highest forms of leadership capability, identified by the management expert Jim Collins in his book, Good to Great. Your ambition can be enormous without your ego needing to be enormous, right? We often teach leadership presence as becoming bigger, speak more confidently, command the room, project authority. Maybe we have misunderstood it. Perhaps the strongest presence in a room isn't the person trying to become bigger. It is a person who doesn't need to tell others nothing. They are settled. They listen. They don't panic when challenged. They can say, I don't know. They can say whatever they feel like saying at the moment with confidence. You were right. They can say, I changed my mind. And somehow, none of that makes them smaller or bigger. It makes them who they are. It makes you trust them more, because insecurity needs constant evidence of status. Humility doesn't. And maybe that's why this is my favorite. Before you can lead other people consistently, you have to stop being led by one's own ego. So here's the question I ask myself often. When the room changes, do I change? Because leadership doesn't create character. Pressure reveals it. But there's still one value left, number 8, which changes the question completely, because the first 7 are about what kind of leader you become. 8th one is about what other people become because of you. I see them. I call this multiplying, or the multiplier effect. Imagine you disappear from your organization tomorrow, not forever, just 6 months, perhaps. What happens? Does everything slow down all of a sudden? Do decisions stop? Does everyone wait for you? If so, you might be an important leader, but you may not yet be a great one. We used to call this empowerment. I prefer multiplying. Are we multiplying leaders? Yes or no? Liz Wiseman's work on multipliers explores leaders who amplify the intelligence and capability of the people around them. And I think this may be where leadership ultimately evolves. At the beginning of your career, success is what can I do? Then leadership becomes what can we do? But eventually the highest expression of leadership becomes what can they do without me? And here's the paradox. Insecure leaders secretly want to be indispensable. Great leaders are trying to make themselves unnecessary. Not irrelevant, but unnecessary. Because they have created capability everywhere. Think about the best leader you have ever had. You probably don't remember every target they gave you, or every meeting you had with them, or every presentation. But maybe you remember the moment they trusted you with something you weren't sure you were ready for in the first place. They saw something in you before you could see it in yourself. And because they believed you could, eventually you did. That's multiplying. A leader was created that moment. And maybe that's the ultimate measure of leadership. How many people follow me is not important. But what is important is how many people became leaders because I led them. That's multiplying. And I just want to leave you with final 8 points that we discussed today. But notice what happened as we moved through them. We started with what people need from you, right? Like clarity, humanity, decisiveness, curiosity, steadiness, ownership. Then we arrived at something deeper. Humility, being authentic, being sincere, being grounded, who you're beneath the title, and finally, multiplying, empowering others. Who are other people becoming because you were the leader? And perhaps that's a leadership shift of our time. We used to think leadership was about having all the answers. Then we thought it was about influence. Then when we thought it's about inspiration. But perhaps leadership has always been something much simpler. You affect on another human being. So don't just ask, am I a good leader? Ask something even harder. When people spend time around me, who do they eventually become? Are they becoming more cautious? Are they becoming more dependent? Or are they becoming more afraid of being wrong? Or are they becoming more confident, more curious, more courageous, or more capable? Because someday those meetings will end. The quarter reports will end. The job will end. The title will disappear. And eventually every leader will leave the room. The question is what remains in the people after you do? That's your leadership. That's your legacy. I'm Vijayan Swaminathan, or VJ if you prefer that. I solve real problems with technology, and this is Pathfinders. Keep finding your path, my friends, and perhaps the greatest thing you can do as a leader is help someone else find their path. Share this episode with others that you care about, and do subscribe and follow us. I will do everything to keep bringing you value. Thank you.